The sharp beep of my phone startled me, momentarily distracting me from the relentless throbbing in my temples. I'd been staring at the same hospital bill for what felt like hours, the numbers swimming before my tired eyes like predators circling wounded prey. $24,873.50. The amount seemed to grow larger each time I looked at it, mocking me from the crisp white paper with its official letterhead and impersonal tone. Final notice, it read at the top in bold crimson letters. My fingers trembled slightly as I reached for my phone, wincing at the movement. 3 months after the accident, my ribs still protested at sudden movements, a constant reminder of how quickly life could change. One moment I'd been crossing the street after my evening shift at Rosie's Diner. The next I was flying through the air, the world spinning in slow motion, before everything went black. The text was from my boss, Rose. Late again tomorrow and don't bother coming back. I bit my lip, fighting back tears of frustration. It wasn't my fault the bus had been delayed, or that I couldn't afford to live closer to the diner. It wasn't my fault that Jason had disappeared the moment I told him about the pregnancy, taking what little savings we had and leaving me with nothing but mounting bills and a broken heart. The baby, our baby, hadn't survived the accident. Sometimes I thought I hadn't either, not really. Some essential part of me had died on that operating table alongside my unborn child. Outside my tiny apartment window, rain lashed against the glass, the sky as dark and heavy as my thoughts. My reflection stared back at me from the window. Hollow cheeks, dark circles beneath dull eyes, limp hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. I barely recognized myself anymore. I needed help. I needed someone, anyone. With shaking fingers, I scrolled through my contacts, landing on Jason's name. I hadn't deleted it yet, though I'd tried countless times. Some pathetic part of me still hoped he'd come back, apologize, help me through this nightmare. The rational part knew better. Before I could talk myself out of it, I typed a message. I know you don't care anymore, but I'm drowning here. The hospital is threatening collections. $24,173.50. I can't do this alone. Please. I hit send before I could change my mind, then tossed the phone onto the worn couch beside me. He wouldn't respond. He never did. But something about sending those words into the void made me feel less alone with the crushing weight of it all. The pain medication the doctor had prescribed was on the coffee table, next to a half-empty bottle of cheap wine. Bad combination. I knew that. But the temptation to just drift away from this reality, even temporarily, was overwhelming. My phone pinged again, probably Rose with more threats. But it wasn't. Wrong number. But I'm curious about your situation. Who's threatening you? I stared at the message, my heart suddenly hammering in my chest. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, but it was only 1 digit off from Jason's. In my exhausted, desperate state, I'd mistyped. I'm sorry, I wrote back quickly. Wrong number. 3 dots appeared immediately. I gathered that. But my question stands. Who's threatening you? Something about the directness sent a chill down my spine. But what did it matter? What else could I possibly lose? The hospital. Medical bills from an accident, nothing criminal. Sorry to bother you. The reply came faster this time. What hospital? I hesitated, then answered truthfully. Mercy General. Your name? This was getting strange. Why do you want to know? Because I might be able to help. I laughed out loud, the sound harsh and unfamiliar in my silent apartment. Right. A random stranger was going to solve my financial problems. Next, he'd be asking for my social security number and bank details. No thanks, I typed. I've had enough disappointment for one lifetime. Fair enough. Good luck with your situation. The brief exchange left me feeling oddly unsettled. I set my phone down again and dragged myself to the bathroom. The woman in the mirror looked ghostly under the harsh fluorescent lights. I splashed cold water on my face, wincing at the contrast against my feverish skin. When I returned to the living room, I noticed my phone screen lit up with another message from the unknown number. Offer stands if you change your mind. I don't like hospitals that threaten vulnerable people. Something in the phrasing caught my attention. There was an edge to it, a coldness that didn't match the seemingly helpful words. I found myself typing back, "Why would you help a stranger?" The response was immediate. Sometimes helping strangers is more satisfying than helping those who think they're entitled to it. I stared at the message, trying to decipher the meaning behind it. Before I could respond, another text came through. "What's your name?" "Against my better judgment," I answered. Emma Sullivan." "Get some rest, Emma Sullivan. Things will look different tomorrow." I didn't know why, but those words sent another chill through me. Not entirely unpleasant, but unsettling nonetheless, like standing at the edge of a precipice, knowing you should step back but feeling strangely drawn to the void below. I woke to insistent knocking. Groggy and disoriented, I fumbled for my phone. 10:17 a.m. I'd overslept. Rose was going to fire me for sure this time. The knocking continued. Pulling on a robe over my pajamas, I approached the door cautiously. Living in this part of town had taught me to be wary. "Who is it?" I called, my voice still rough with sleep. "Delivery for Emma Sullivan," a male voice answered. I hadn't ordered anything. Couldn't afford to. "I think you have the wrong apartment," I said through the door. "Apartment 4B, Emma Sullivan? It's from Mercy General Hospital." My heart skipped a beat. Had they sent someone to collect in person now? With trembling hands, I unlatched the chain and opened the door a crack. A man in a courier uniform stood there holding an envelope. Nothing threatening about him, just an ordinary guy doing his job. "Sign here, please," he said, offering an electronic pad. Still confused, I scribbled my signature and accepted the envelope. It was thick, made of heavy cream paper with the hospital's embossed logo in the corner. I closed the door, sliding the chain back into place before opening the envelope. Inside was a formal letter on hospital stationery. "Dear Ms. Sullivan, we are pleased to inform you that your outstanding balance of $24,973.50 has been paid in full by an anonymous benefactor. Your account is now cleared, and no further action is required on your part. Enclosed, please find receipt of payment and documentation for your records. Sincerely, Financial Services Department, Mercy General Hospital." I sat down hard on the floor, the letter fluttering from my numb fingers. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen, not to people like me, but as I examined the enclosed documents, it became clear that it was indeed real. Someone had paid my hospital bill. Every cent, the mysterious texter. It had to be. I grabbed my phone and typed with shaking fingers. "Was it you? Did you pay my hospital bill?" The reply came almost instantly. "I told you things would look different today." My heart pounded. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me. Let's just say I have a particular interest in Mercy General. Your situation provided an opportunity. An opportunity for what? To irritate someone who deserves it." There was something calculated about his responses, something that made me feel like I was only seeing the surface of a much deeper game. But gratitude overwhelmed my caution. "I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me yet. We're just getting started." Those words should have terrified me. Instead, they sent a strange thrill through my veins, a feeling I barely recognized after months of nothing but despair. Hope. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means you should get dressed, Emma Sullivan. A car will pick you up in 1 hour." I stared at the message, my momentary elation giving way to alarm. I'm not getting in a car with a stranger. Wise policy. But consider this. I already know your full name and where you live. If I meant you harm, I wouldn't need to send a car. The cold logic of it made my skin prickle. He was right, of course. And what did I have to lose, really? Where would we be going? To meet. I prefer to conduct business face to face. Business? What business could we possibly have? You need a job. I need someone with your particular qualities. I almost laughed. You don't know anything about my qualities. I know more than you might think. 1 hour, Emma. The driver will wait 5 minutes. After that, the opportunity expires. I sat back against the wall, my mind racing. This was insane. Getting into a car sent by an anonymous texter who'd paid my hospital bills on a whim, every cautionary tale, every warning about strangers and their motives screamed in my head. But beneath the caution was a flicker of something else. Curiosity. Desperation. a reckless desire to feel something, anything, other than the crushing weight of my current existence. Besides, what was the alternative? Go back to being threatened and harassed by bill collectors? Beg Rose for a job she'd already halfway taken from me? Before I could change my mind, I typed, "I'll be ready." I showered quickly, the hot water a luxury I usually rationed but today indulged in. My wardrobe offered few options, mostly Rosie's diner uniforms and worn casual clothes. I settled on my one decent outfit: black pants, a blue blouse that brought out the color in my otherwise tired eyes, and a cardigan that hid how much weight I'd lost since the accident. As I applied a minimal amount of makeup, I caught myself in the mirror. For the first time in months, there was color in my cheeks, a spark in my expression. Fear, yes, but also something like anticipation. At precisely 1 hour from his last text, my phone pinged. "Your car is outside." I moved to the window and peered down at the street below. A sleek black car with tinted windows idled at the curb, conspicuously out of place in my rundown neighborhood. The driver stood beside it, immaculately dressed in a dark suit, scanning the building entrances. This was my last chance to back out, to stay in the relative safety of my miserable but familiar life. Instead, I grabbed my purse, keys, and phone, and headed for the door. The autumn air hit me as I stepped outside, crisp and invigorating after the staleness of my apartment. The driver spotted me immediately, his expression giving away nothing as he opened the rear door. "Ms. Sullivan?" he said with a slight nod. I hesitated at the open door, peering into the dimly lit interior. Empty. Just plush leather seats and the faint scent of expensive cologne. "Where are we going?" I asked the driver. "The Archer Hotel downtown, miss." It shouldn't take more than 20 minutes in current traffic. A hotel. Public. Populated. Safer than some isolated location. I slid into the back seat, and he closed the door with a soft click that sounded somehow final. As the car pulled away from the curb, I watched my apartment building recede in the window. The rain had stopped, leaving everything looking washed clean, glistening in the midday sun. My phone vibrated in my hand. "Good choice, Emma. I look forward to meeting you." I stared at the message, reality finally catching up to me. I was in a stranger's car, heading to meet someone who'd paid off my hospital bill without knowing me, who claimed to have some kind of business proposition. What had I done? The Archer Hotel loomed before me, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that seemed to belong to another world entirely, a world I'd only glimpsed through storefront windows and glossy magazine pages. As the car glided to a stop beneath the covered entrance, a doorman in an impeccable uniform stepped forward to open my door. "Welcome to the Archer, miss," he said with practiced courtesy, though I caught the slight flicker in his eyes as he took in my modest appearance. The driver spoke quietly to the doorman, who nodded and turned to me. "If you'll follow me, Ms. Sullivan, you're expected in the Meridian suite." My heart hammered against my ribs as I followed him through the opulent lobby. Marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers, and well-dressed people lounged on velvet sofas, their voices a gentle murmur of privilege and ease. I felt painfully out of place, like a sparrow that had accidentally flown into a peacock enclosure. The elevator was mirrored, forcing me to confront my reflection from all angles. I looked small and scared, despite my attempts to stand straight and project confidence. The doorman inserted a key card and pressed the button for the top floor without speaking. When the doors opened, we stepped not into a hallway, but directly into what appeared to be a private foyer. The doorman gestured toward a set of double doors ahead. "Mr. Castellano is waiting for you," he said, then retreated into the elevator, leaving me alone. Mr. Castellano. At least now I had a name for my mysterious benefactor. Before I could knock, one of the doors opened, revealing a tall man in a charcoal suit. Not the man I'd come to meet. His demeanor screamed security. His gaze swept over me in a quick assessment, and I had the distinct impression I was being scanned for weapons. "This way," he said, stepping aside to let me pass. I entered a suite so vast it made my entire apartment look like a closet in comparison. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, my city, though I'd never seen it from this angle before, spread out like a glittering tapestry far below. Ms. Sullivan. The voice came from the far side of the room, near the windows. Deep, measured, with the faintest accent I couldn't quite place. I turned toward it and saw him for the first time. He stood with his back partially to me, gazing out at the view, a glass of amber liquid in one hand. Tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in what even I could tell was a custom suit. Dark hair, closely cropped at the sides but longer on top, not a strand out of place. When he turned to face me, I felt the air leave my lungs in a silent rush. He wasn't conventionally handsome. His features were too sharp, too severe for that. His nose had been broken at least once, and a thin scar traced the edge of his jaw on one side. But there was something magnetic about him, an intensity that made it impossible to look away. His eyes were the color of steel, and just as unyielding. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to a seating area. "Please, make yourself comfortable." I remained standing, suddenly aware of every inadequacy in my appearance, my clothes, my entire existence. "You're Mr. Castellano?" A slight smile touched his lips but didn't reach his eyes. "Dante Castellano, yes." "And you're Emma Sullivan." He moved toward me with a fluid grace that reminded me of a predator. Unhurried because there was no need to rush. His prey wasn't going anywhere. I forced myself to stand my ground as he approached, though every instinct screamed at me to back away. He stopped at a respectful distance, studying me with those penetrating eyes. "You look better than your hospital photos," he observed. A chill ran through me. "You have my hospital photos?" "I have your entire medical file. Broken ribs, punctured lung, concussion, and a miscarriage at 16 weeks. The driver who hit you was never charged, despite having a blood alcohol level twice the legal limit. His name is Charles Whitman III, son of Judge Charles Whitman Jr. Funny how these things work out. My legs suddenly felt weak. I sank onto the nearest chair, my mind reeling. "How do you know all this?" "Information is my business, Ms. Sullivan." He moved to a bar cart and poured another glass of what looked like whiskey. "Would you like a drink? You look like you could use one." I shook my head. "I want to know why I'm here." He brought his glass over and sat across from me, one ankle resting casually on the opposite knee. Everything about him exuded control. Over himself, the environment, and, I suspected, everyone who entered his orbit. Direct. Good. I appreciate that in business associates. He took a sip of his drink. "I paid your medical bills because I could. Because the hospital administration has been particularly uncooperative with some of my recent endeavors, and because your situation intrigued me." "Intrigued you?" His eyes flicked over me again, assessing. "You've lost everything, yet you're still fighting. That speaks to character." "I'm not fighting," I said bitterly. "I'm barely surviving. There's a dignity in your struggle many would have broken by now." I laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. "Is that what this is about? You wanted to see up close what a dignified struggle looks like?" The hint of a smile appeared again, slightly more genuine this time. "No, this is about offering you an opportunity." "What kind of opportunity?" I asked warily. "I need an assistant, someone discreet, someone with no particular attachments or commitments, someone who can start immediately." I stared at him. "An assistant? For what?" "For whatever I need assistance with." He set his glass down on a side table. "The position pays $15,000 a month, plus accommodations and expenses. You'd be required to be available at all times, but the actual demands on your time would vary." The amount made my head swim. $15,000 a month was more than I'd make in half a year at the diner. "This can't be real," I said half to myself. "I assure you it is. But before you accept, you should know a few things." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intensifying. "I value loyalty and discretion above all else. You would see and hear things in my employ that must remain private. Breaking that trust would have consequences." The threat was implicit but clear. "What exactly do you do, Mr. Castellano?" "I have various business interests: import-export, real estate, hospitality. Nothing that would appear on the front page of the business section, but profitable nonetheless." There was something practiced about the answer, as if he'd delivered it many times before, something that didn't quite ring true. "And you need an assistant who has no particular attachments or commitments." I repeated his words, realization dawning. You're not talking about a normal job, are you? He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes, turning them from steel to quicksilver. Perceptive. Another valuable quality. Are you... I hesitated, the question suddenly seeming too absurd to voice. Am I what, Ms. Sullivan? His tone was almost amused. Involved in something illegal? I finally managed to ask. He didn't answer immediately, simply studying me with that penetrating gaze. Would it matter if I were? The question caught me off guard. Would it matter? A week ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. But now, sitting in this luxurious suite, with the weight of my hospital bills magically lifted from my shoulders, facing a man who offered financial security I'd never dreamed possible, I wasn't so sure. I don't want to be part of anything that hurts people, I said finally. A reasonable boundary. I can respect that. He rose in one fluid motion and walked back to the windows, looking out over the city again. I won't lie to you, Mrs. Sullivan. My business operations exist in gray areas sometimes. But I have my own code, my own ethics. I don't deal in human trafficking, drugs, or weapons. I don't target innocents. Then what do you deal in? He turned to look at me over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. Protection. Problem-solving. Creating order from chaos. A euphemism if I'd ever heard one. My mind raced through possibilities, landing on the most obvious one given his name, his manner, the power he exuded. You're in the Mafia, I said, the words sounding ridiculous even as they left my mouth. He didn't confirm or deny it, just turned back to face me fully. I'm offering you a way out of your current situation, Mrs. Sullivan. A chance to rebuild your life on your terms. All I ask in return is your loyalty and discretion. I should have gotten up then. Should have thanked him for paying my hospital bills, and walked out the door, back to my miserable but safe existence. But something kept me rooted to the spot. Fascination, desperation, or perhaps the simple fact that I had nothing left to lose. What would I actually be doing? I asked instead. Managing my schedule, coordinating with my other staff, handling correspondence, occasionally accompanying me to meetings or events. He moved back toward me, his presence filling the room. Nothing beyond your capabilities, I assure you. And the accommodations? I own the penthouse apartment in a building not far from here. It's currently unoccupied. It would be yours for as long as you remain in my employ. It all sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. Why me? I asked, the question that had been nagging at me since his first text. There must be hundreds of people better qualified. Something flickered across his face. A shadow of emotion quickly suppressed. You sent a text meant for a man who abandoned you and your unborn child. A man who stole from you when you needed him most, yet there was no hatred in your message, only a simple request for help. He paused. That says something about your character, Emma Sullivan. Something rare. The use of my full name sent an odd shiver through me. There was an intimacy to it, as if he was tasting the syllables, claiming them somehow. And if I say no? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Then the driver takes you home, and your life continues as before. Minus the hospital debt, of course. That's been taken care of regardless of your decision today. I looked around the opulent suite, then down at my worn shoes, thinking of my empty apartment with its past due notices and fading memories. Thinking of Rosie's diner and the endless struggle just to stay afloat. Then I looked back at Dante Castellano, with his dangerous eyes and carefully measured words. A man who'd paid a stranger's hospital bills on a whim. A man who clearly operated outside the boundaries of conventional society. A man who could snap his fingers and make problems disappear. Or people, perhaps. When would I start? I heard myself ask. His smile was slow and satisfied, like a predator who'd successfully lured its prey exactly where it wanted. Immediately. Do you need to collect anything from your apartment? The speed of it all made my head spin. Yes. My clothes, some personal items. The driver will take you. Pack whatever you need. Everything else can be replaced. He moved to a desk and wrote something on a card. This is my private number. Memorize it, then destroy the card. From now on, you contact only me, not my staff. He held out the card, and as I reached for it, his fingers brushed against mine. A jolt of something. Electricity, warning, I wasn't sure which, shot through me at the contact. "One last thing, Ms. Sullivan." His voice dropped lower, taking on an edge I hadn't heard before. "Now that you've accepted my offer, you're under my protection. That means if anyone at all, causes you trouble, you come to me. Understood?" The intensity in his eyes made it clear this wasn't a casual statement. It was a fundamental condition of our arrangement. "Understood," I said, the word barely audible. "Good." He stepped back, and just like that, the moment of tension dissolved. "My driver will wait while you pack. When you're ready, he'll bring you to your new residence. I'll meet you there this evening to discuss the details of your position." As I stood to leave, feeling as though I'd just signed some invisible contract whose terms I didn't fully comprehend, he added, "Welcome to your new life, Emma Sullivan." And despite every warning bell sounding in my mind, I couldn't help but feel a thrill of anticipation at those words. A new life. One without crushing debt and constant struggle. One with purpose and security, even if it came with strings I couldn't yet see. The driver waited silently as I packed my life into 2 suitcases and a duffel bag. It didn't take long. Clothes, toiletries, a few photos, the dog-eared paperbacks that had been my only escape during the long, lonely nights after the accident. I lingered over a small wooden box that held the only evidence my baby had ever existed. An ultrasound photo, a tiny knitted hat I'd bought in a moment of hopeful anticipation, a hospital bracelet with my name and the date that had changed everything. After a moment's hesitation, I placed it carefully in my bag. Whatever new life I was stepping into, I wouldn't leave these memories behind. I took one last look around the apartment that had witnessed my lowest moments. The walls seemed to hold the echoes of my tears, my pain, my despair. Yet as I closed the door behind me, I felt not sadness but a strange lightness. Relief, perhaps, or simply the vertigo that comes with stepping off a precipice, not knowing where you'll land. The driver took my bags without comment, and we drove in silence through streets that grew progressively more upscale. Finally, we pulled up to a sleek high-rise in the heart of the financial district, all glass and brushed steel reaching toward the sky. A uniformed doorman rushed to open my door, his expression professionally neutral as he welcomed me. "Ms. Sullivan," he said with a slight bow. "Mr. Castellano has arranged everything. Pierre will show you to your apartment." The building manager, a thin man with precise movements, appeared almost instantly, introducing himself with a practiced smile. "We're so pleased to have you joining us. Mr. Castellano's associates are always welcome here." The way he emphasized associates made me wonder exactly what Dante had told him about me, about our arrangement. But I merely smiled and followed him to a private elevator that required both a key card and a fingerprint scan to operate. "Your biometrics have already been programmed into our security system," Pierre explained, noting my surprise. "Mr. Castellano is very thorough." The elevator opened directly into a foyer larger than my entire former apartment. Beyond it stretched a living space that took my breath away. Soaring ceilings, walls of glass offering panoramic views of the city and harbor, furnishings that managed to be both minimalist and luxurious. "The kitchen is fully stocked," Pierre continued, leading me through the space. "The master suite is through here, with 2 additional bedrooms down that hall. Each has its own bathroom, of course. The office is set up with all the technology you might need. If you require anything else, day or night, simply call the concierge. The number is programmed into all the phones." He handed me a small leather folder. "Your key cards, the building information, and some welcome materials. Is there anything else you need at the moment?" I shook my head, still struggling to process the reality of my new surroundings. "Very good. Mr. Castellano mentioned he would be joining you at 7. Will you be requiring dinner service?" No, thank you. The idea of servants preparing a meal for me in this alien environment was too much to process. After Pierre left, I wandered through the apartment in a daze, running my fingers over surfaces too perfect to be real. Marble countertops, silk upholstery, cashmere throws artfully arranged on designer furniture. The master bedroom featured a bed big enough for 4 people and a wall of windows that made me feel as though I was floating above the city. The closet was a room unto itself, mostly empty except for a few garment bags hanging at the far end. Curious, I unzipped one to find a black cocktail dress, simple but elegant, with a designer label I recognized from magazines. The next bag held a tailored blazer and pants in deep navy. There were shoes, too, and a small selection of lingerie still in boxes, all exactly my size. He'd been very thorough indeed. The bathroom was equally impressive, with a shower large enough for a small party and a soaking tub positioned before yet another wall of windows. I ran a finger along the edge of the marble counter, where high-end toiletries were arranged with military precision. It was all so beautiful, so pristine, so utterly removed from anything I'd ever known, and it wasn't mine. Not really. It was a gilded cage provided by a man I barely knew, a man whose business existed in gray areas, who spoke of loyalty and discretion with thinly veiled threats beneath the surface. What had I gotten myself into? I unpacked my meager possessions, feeling their inadequacy in this opulent space. My faded jeans and worn sweaters looked pathetically out of place hanging beside the designer clothes. The wooden box with my baby's mementos I placed in the bedside drawer, close enough to touch in the night if the dreams came again. At 6:30, I showered in the palatial bathroom, letting the hot water sluice away the grime of my old life. I dried my hair, applied the minimal makeup I'd brought with me, and faced the closet with a sense of uncertainty. Should I wear one of the outfits he'd provided? Would that signal too much acceptance of whatever this was? In the end, I compromised, putting on my own black pants with one of the silk blouses I found hanging in the closet. It fit perfectly, draping in ways my discount store clothes never had. I slipped on my own shoes, refusing to completely surrender my identity on the first day. At precisely 7 o'clock, the intercom chimed. "Mr. Castellano is on his way up, Ms. Sullivan," the concierge's voice informed me. My heart rate accelerated as I moved to the foyer, smoothing my hair nervously. When the elevator doors opened, Dante wasn't alone. Behind him stood 2 men whose purpose was unmistakable. Security, bodyguards, muscle. Whatever you called them, they exuded the same dangerous competence as the man I'd met at the hotel. "Emma," Dante said, stepping forward while his men remained in the elevator. "I trust everything is satisfactory?" "It's overwhelming," I admitted. A slight smile touched his lips. "You'll adapt quickly." He dismissed his security with a subtle nod, and the elevator doors closed, leaving us alone. He looked different somehow, still immaculate in another beautifully tailored suit, but more relaxed, less formally poised. He carried a leather portfolio in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. "I thought we might discuss the details of your position over dinner," he said, moving past me into the apartment. He set the portfolio down on a console table and proceeded to the kitchen, where he opened the wine with practiced ease. "I don't actually know how to cook in a kitchen like this," I admitted, following him. He glanced up, that almost smile appearing again. "Fortunately, I do. Sit, watch, learn." It was a command, not a suggestion, but delivered with a casualness that made it seem almost friendly. I perched on one of the bar stools at the kitchen island as he removed his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves with precise movements, and began to explore the refrigerator and pantry. There was something incongruous about watching this dangerous man, for dangerous he surely was, moving with such domestic confidence. He selected ingredients, found pots and knives without hesitation, and began preparing what appeared to be a simple pasta dish, with an assurance that suggested he'd done this many times before. "The secret is quality ingredients, minimal interference," he explained, pouring olive oil into a pan. "And timing. Everything in life comes down to timing." He poured 2 glasses of wine, sliding one toward me before returning to his cooking. The domesticity of the scene was surreal, as if we were playing at being normal people, a man and a woman sharing a meal at the end of a day, rather than whatever we actually were. "Tell me about yourself, Emma," he said as he chopped herbs with quick, precise movements. "What do you want to know?" "Whatever you're willing to share." I sipped the wine, buying time. It was rich and complex, probably costing more than I'd made in a week at the diner. There's not much to tell. I grew up in foster care, aged out of the system, worked various jobs, met Jason, thought we had something real, found out I was wrong. I shrugged. The usual sad story. And the baby? He asked, his eyes never leaving his task. The question sent a familiar ache through my chest. Unplanned, but not unwanted. At least not by me. He nodded as if confirming something to himself. Jason. He said the name with a subtle distaste. The man you were trying to contact when you texted me. Yes. What would you do if you saw him again? The question caught me off guard. I don't know. I used to think I'd beg him to come back. Then I thought I'd scream at him, make him feel some fraction of the pain he caused. I stared into my wine glass. Now, I'm not sure I'd do anything. He doesn't deserve the energy it would take to hate him. Dante made a sound that might have been approval. Hatred is useful only when properly channeled. Otherwise, it's a waste of resources. He finished preparing the pasta, plating it with an artful twist that spoke of practice. We moved to the dining table, a sleek expanse of dark wood with the city lights glittering beyond the windows. He waited for me to sit before taking his own seat, a small courtesy that somehow emphasized the power differential between us more than rudeness would have. Now, he said after I'd taken a few bites of the surprisingly delicious meal, let's discuss your duties. He opened the portfolio he'd brought, revealing a stack of documents. First, the formal details. Your salary will be deposited directly into a new account I've established for you. He slid a folder toward me. The details are in here, along with a credit card for expenses. The apartment is secured for the duration of your employment. The building staff has been instructed to provide whatever assistance you require. I set down my fork, my appetite suddenly diminished by the business-like reminder of our arrangement. And what exactly will I be doing to earn all this? As I mentioned, you'll be managing my schedule, coordinating with my staff, handling correspondence. I travel frequently between here and my other properties. You'll often accompany me. What about my background? I don't exactly have the qualifications for this kind of position. His eyes met mine across the table, steady and assessing. Your qualifications are precisely what I require, Emma. You have no connections that could compromise my interests, no allegiances that might conflict with your loyalty to me, and you've demonstrated a capacity for discretion and adaptation under pressure, because I didn't run screaming from your offer. A genuine smile this time, transforming his severe features into something almost warm, because you recognize the value of the opportunity, despite the obvious risks. And those risks? You mentioned consequences for betraying your trust. The smile disappeared, his expression cooling. Those who betray me don't get the opportunity to do so twice. But that won't be an issue between us, will it, Emma? It wasn't really a question. We both knew I had nowhere else to go. No other options that didn't involve returning to the desperate existence I'd just escaped. No, I agreed softly. It won't. Good. He pushed another document toward me. This is a non-disclosure agreement, standard in business relationships like ours. I skimmed the dense legal text, understanding perhaps a quarter of it. The penalties for violation were spelled out in clear, threatening terms. Sign it, he said, offering a pen. As I signed my name on the line, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making a deal with the devil. But then, the devil had already paid my hospital bills, given me a place to live, offered me financial security I'd never dreamed possible. If the price was my loyalty and silence, it seemed a bargain compared to what life had already cost me. Dante collected the signed document with a satisfied nod. You begin officially tomorrow. My driver will collect you at 7. Wear something from what I've provided. You'll be accompanying me to meetings. What kind of meetings? I asked. Business meetings. His tone made it clear that further questions on the subject weren't welcome. For tonight, make yourself comfortable. Familiarize yourself with the apartment. There's a secure phone in the office. Memorize the numbers programmed into it. Those are the only people authorized to contact you directly. He rose, signaling the end of our discussion. I stood as well, suddenly aware of how close he was in the dimly lit dining area. He seemed to occupy more space than his physical form should allow, his presence filling the room with a tension I couldn't quite name. Thank you for dinner. I said, searching for the appropriate response to this bizarre situation. You're welcome, Emma. He studied me for a moment longer, his expression unreadable. Then he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face, the gesture so unexpected that I froze. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be educational. With that, he collected his portfolio and jacket and moved toward the elevator. Just before the doors closed, he looked back at me. Remember, Emma, you're under my protection now. That means something in my world. As the elevator doors slid shut, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Alone in the vast, luxurious apartment, surrounded by evidence of wealth and power I could barely comprehend, I felt both trapped and strangely free. I was playing a game whose rules I didn't understand, with a man who moved pieces I couldn't see. But for the first time in months, I wasn't drowning in debt and despair. For better or worse, I had stepped into Dante Castellano's world, and there would be no going back. Morning came with startling brightness, sunlight streaming through the wall of windows I'd forgotten to cover. For a disorienting moment, I didn't recognize where I was. The too-soft bed, the luxurious sheets, the vast expanse of the room all felt like a dream. Then reality crashed back. Dante Castellano, our arrangement, my new life. I showered quickly and stood before the closet, eyeing the designer clothes he'd provided. Given his instructions, I selected a charcoal pencil skirt and a cream silk blouse, paired with modest heels. Professional, elegant, but not flashy. The outfit probably cost more than I'd made in 2 months at the diner. At precisely 7, the intercom chimed to announce the driver's arrival. I grabbed a sleek leather portfolio I'd found in the office. Empty, but it seemed like the kind of prop an executive assistant might carry, and headed down. The same driver from yesterday waited with a black SUV, its windows tinted to near opacity. He opened the door without speaking, and I slid into the back seat to find Dante already inside, immersed in something on his phone. Good morning, I ventured. He looked up, his eyes sweeping over me in a quick assessment. The outfit suits you. He returned to his phone for another moment, then set it aside. Today you'll observe, listen, watch, remember. Don't speak unless spoken to, and if anyone asks about your role, you're my personal assistant, nothing more. What exactly am I observing? How I conduct business, the people I deal with, the dynamics at play. His gaze was intense, measuring. Your instincts about people, are they good? The question caught me off guard. I think so. Though my history with Jason might suggest otherwise. Something like amusement flickered across his face. Romantic attachment clouds, judgment. I'm talking about your ability to read intentions, to sense deception. I considered this. In the foster system, reading people quickly had been a survival skill. Knowing which adults would keep their promises, which kids would turn on you, which situations were genuinely dangerous. These assessments had become second nature. Yes, I said with more confidence. My instincts are good. We'll see. He turned to look out the window as the city passed by. That will be one of your primary functions. To observe interactions I'm part of, and give me your unfiltered impressions afterward. You want me to tell you if I think someone is lying to you? He turned back, something dangerous glittering in his eyes. Among other things, the car pulled up to an unassuming building in the warehouse district. No sign, no indication of what business might operate inside. The driver opened Dante's door first, then mine. As I stepped out, I noticed 2 men detach themselves from the shadows of a nearby doorway and move to flank us. Dante placed a hand lightly at the small of my back, guiding me toward the entrance. The gesture seemed both protective and possessive, marking me as under his authority. The men at the door nodded respectfully as we approached, their eyes lingering on me with obvious curiosity. Boss, one acknowledged, opening the door. Inside was unexpected luxury, a reception area with gleaming floors and modern art on the walls, staffed by a woman whose perfect makeup and sharp attire couldn't quite disguise the hardness in her eyes. Mr. Castellano, she greeted, rising. They're waiting for you in the conference room. Dante nodded, his hand still at my back as he guided me down a hallway. Before we reached what I assumed was the conference room, he paused, turning to face me. "Remember," he said quietly, "observe everything, react to nothing." With that enigmatic instruction, he led me into a room where 5 men sat around a polished table. They all rose as Dante entered, their expressions a mix of deference and wariness. My presence drew curious glances, but no one commented as Dante directed me to a chair slightly behind his at the head of the table. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice taking on a different quality, smoother, colder. "Let's not waste time. The situation at the docks has become untenable." What followed was a discussion that carefully avoided explicit mentions of anything illegal, yet made it abundantly clear that whatever shipments and operations they were discussing existed far outside legitimate business. I kept my face carefully neutral, trying to absorb everything without revealing my growing unease. One man in particular, introduced only as Vince, seemed especially agitated, his gestures becoming more expansive as the discussion progressed. "With respect, Dante," he said, his tone suggesting the opposite of respect. "The Rivera crew isn't going to back down without a show of force. We need to send a message." Dante's posture remained relaxed, but I sensed a subtle shift in the energy around him, like the air before a lightning strike. "And what message would you suggest, Vincenzo?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. The other men shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between Dante and Vince. "A definitive one," Vince insisted, "either oblivious to the danger or deliberately pushing boundaries. Take out their operation at Pier 17. Show them what happens when they try to move in on our territory." Dante was silent for a long moment, his fingers lightly drumming on the table. Then, without warning, he smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. "An interesting perspective." He glanced at his watch. "We'll continue this discussion later. For now, I have another engagement. Marco will coordinate the increased security measures we discussed." The dismissal was clear. The men rose, nodding respectfully to Dante as they filed out. Only Vince lingered, clearly unsatisfied with the outcome. "Dante," he began. "Later, Vincenzo." Dante's tone left no room for argument. "My assistant will call you to schedule a private discussion." After a tense moment, Vince nodded and left, his displeasure evident in every line of his body. When the door closed behind him, Dante turned to me, his expression unreadable. "Your observations?" I hesitated, organizing my thoughts. "Vince doesn't respect your authority the way the others do. He was pushing for a violent response to assert dominance." "And the others?" "Marco seems completely loyal. The older man, Angelo, was uncomfortable with the whole conversation. The 2 younger ones were harder to read, but they followed your lead, not Vince's." A flicker of approval crossed Dante's face. "Good. What else?" I took a breath. "This isn't just about business territory, is it? The Rivera crew, they're a rival organization, a rival family." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Go on." "This is about power, control, and Vince wants to use violence to maintain it, but you're considering other options." "Perceptive." He rose, buttoning his jacket. "Violence is a tool, Emma, sometimes necessary, never desirable. It attracts attention, creates chaos. I prefer order." I stood as well, processing this glimpse into his philosophy. "Is that why you're in this business? To create order?" Something almost like amusement crossed his face. "In a world of chaos, someone must." "Now, we have another meeting." The rest of the day followed a similar pattern. Meetings in unmarked buildings or private rooms of upscale restaurants. Discussions that danced around explicit mentions of criminal activity while making the nature of Dante's business unmistakably clear. I observed as instructed, noting the dynamics between Dante and his various associates, the deference most showed him, the occasional tension with those who seemed to question his methods. Through it all, Dante remained calm, controlled, radiating a quiet authority that needed no loud displays. When he did grow cold, as he did with one associate who attempted to explain away a significant discrepancy in accounts, the effect was chilling. He never raised his voice, never made explicit threats, yet the man left ashen-faced and visibly shaken. By late afternoon, we arrived at what appeared to be Dante's primary office, an entire floor of a high-rise downtown, accessed through a private elevator. Unlike the unmarked locations we'd visited earlier, This space was openly luxurious, with his name discreetly displayed in the reception area. Castellano Enterprises, I murmured, reading the elegant logo on the wall. The legitimate face of my operations, Dante explained. Real estate, investment management, import, export, all perfectly legal and profitable. A woman in her 50s, immaculately dressed and radiating efficiency, approached us. Mr. Castellano, your 4 o'clock called to reschedule, and Mr. Rossi is waiting in your office. Thank you, Margaret. Dante turned to me. This is Emma Sullivan. She'll be working directly with me from now on. If Margaret was surprised by this announcement, she hid it well. Of course. Should I prepare credentials and security access? Already handled. Emma will coordinate with you on administrative matters. Very good. Welcome, Ms. Sullivan. As Dante led me through the office, I noticed the subtle shifts in how staff responded to him. Respect and professionalism, but without the undercurrent of fear I'd observed in our earlier meetings. Here, he was simply a successful businessman, not the dangerous figure who made hardened men go pale with a few quiet words. In his corner office, a man waited by the window, older, distinguished, with silver hair and an expensive suit. He turned as we entered, his expression warming. Dante, he greeted, moving forward to clasp Dante's hand in both of his. Good to see you, son. The familial term surprised me, though they shared no obvious resemblance. The older man's attention shifted to me, curiosity in his shrewd eyes. And who is this lovely young woman? Emma Sullivan, Dante replied. My new assistant. Emma, this is Vincent Rossi, my father's oldest friend and my most trusted advisor. The older man's eyebrows rose slightly. I see. He extended a hand to me, his grip firm. A pleasure, Ms. Sullivan. Likewise, Mr. Rossi. Vincent. Please. His smile was warm, but his eyes were evaluating, missing nothing. I'm practically family, after all. Dante moved to his desk. Emma, would you give us a few minutes? Margaret can show you around the office. I nodded, recognizing the dismissal. As I turned to leave, I caught Vincent's murmured words. Replacing Sophia so quickly, Dante? I didn't hear Dante's response as the door closed behind me. Margaret gave me an efficient tour of the office, explaining various departments and introducing me to key staff. Throughout, I caught curious glances, whispers behind hands. Clearly, my sudden appearance in Dante's inner circle was causing speculation. Don't mind them, Margaret said as we returned to the reception area. Mr. Castellano's personal life is a subject of endless fascination around here. His personal life? I repeated, confused. She gave me a knowing look. The last young woman who held a position similar to yours was more than an assistant to him. The implication was clear, and heat rose to my cheeks. I'm just his assistant, nothing more. Of course, she agreed, too quickly to be convincing. Though I must say, he's never before brought an assistant to the type of meetings you attended today. Before I could respond, the door to Dante's office opened, and Vincent Rossi emerged. He paused when he saw me, that evaluating gaze sweeping over me once more. Ms. Sullivan, he said, approaching. I hope we'll have an opportunity to become better acquainted. Dante values your position highly, which makes you someone I should know better. There was something subtly threatening beneath the cordial words, a warning I couldn't quite decipher. I'd like that, I replied carefully. He smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. Take care of him. He carries more burdens than he lets anyone see. With that enigmatic statement, he departed, leaving me wondering what exactly I'd stumbled into. When I returned to Dante's office, he was standing at the window, his posture rigid with tension I hadn't observed earlier. Is everything all right? I asked. He turned, his expression softening slightly when he saw me. Vincent has concerns about my management style. He prefers the old ways, violence instead of negotiation, I guessed. A hint of surprise crossed his face. You do pay attention. It's what you're paying me for, isn't it? His lips curved in a slight smile. Among other things. He moved to his desk, gathering some documents. That's enough for today. We'll continue tomorrow. The driver will take you home. And you? I have a final meeting, a delicate situation that requires my personal attention. Something in his tone made me uneasy. Vince? I guessed. His eyes met mine, sharp with surprise. Your instincts are indeed good, Emma Sullivan. Be careful, I said impulsively. He doesn't strike me as someone who accepts correction gracefully. For a moment, Dante looked genuinely taken aback by my concern. Then his expression warmed subtly. I've been managing men like Vincenzo for many years, but I appreciate the sentiment. As I turned to leave, he called my name. When I looked back, his expression had grown serious again. You've seen much today that others never do. You understand what that means? I nodded, the weight of my new reality settling over me. Complete discretion. I remember. Good. He hesitated, then added, You did well today, Emma. Better than I anticipated. The unexpected praise warmed me more than it should have. Thank you. As the driver took me back to the apartment, I gazed out at the darkening city, trying to process everything I'd witnessed. In a single day, all my suspicions had been confirmed. Dante Castellano was indeed what I'd suspected, a man whose power extended far beyond legitimate business, and I had willingly tied my fate to his. Block 5. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm both exhilarating and terrifying. Each day brought new insights into Dante's world, a complex web of power, loyalty, and calculated violence that existed beneath the veneer of his legitimate businesses. I accompanied him to meetings, took notes, observed the people around him, and gradually began to understand the vast empire he controlled. By day, we moved through the polished corridors of Castellano Enterprises, where Dante was simply a successful businessman with diverse investments. By night, we visited clubs, restaurants, and warehouses where his true authority was exercised, places where men with hard eyes and concealed weapons nodded respectfully as we passed. And through it all, I watched him. The subtle shifts in his demeanor, the careful calibration of charm and menace he deployed as needed, the isolated moments of weariness I occasionally glimpsed when he thought no one was looking. After each meeting, he would ask for my observations, listening intently as I shared my impressions of the people we'd encountered. He never explained why my insights mattered to him, but I sensed he valued the fresh perspective I brought, uncolored by years of immersion in his world. You see things others miss, he remarked one evening as we returned from a particularly tense negotiation. People underestimate you because of your appearance, your youth. It's a valuable advantage. I'd learned that such comments were as close as Dante came to praise, and I found myself pathetically pleased whenever I earned them. It troubled me how much I'd come to crave his approval, how easily I'd adapted to this strange half-life as his shadow. The lines I'd once thought immovable had blurred with alarming speed. Criminal enterprises that would have horrified me weeks ago now seemed merely like complicated business operations. The occasional violence, always orchestrated at a distance, never directly witnessed, became an unfortunate necessity rather than a moral outrage. I was changing, adapting to survive in Dante's world. And sometimes, late at night in my luxurious apartment, that realization terrified me. But there were other changes too, ones I was less willing to acknowledge. The way my pulse quickened when Dante entered a room, the hyper-awareness I felt in his presence, the dreams that left me flushed and disoriented in the pre-dawn darkness. I told myself it was simply the result of prolonged proximity to a powerful, dangerous man. Stockholm Syndrome, perhaps, or the natural human tendency to seek connection, even in the most unlikely places, nothing more. Until the night everything changed. It began ordinarily enough. We'd attended a charity gala, one of the society events Dante occasionally frequented to maintain his public image as a philanthropic business leader. I'd worn a gown he'd provided, a midnight blue creation that transformed me from the hollow-eyed waitress I'd once been into someone who could move confidently among the city's elite. Throughout the evening, I'd noticed a tension in Dante that hadn't been present when we arrived. His eyes scanned the room more frequently, and he kept me closer than usual, his hand often at the small of my back as we navigated the crowded ballroom. "Is something wrong?" I murmured as we stood at the edge of the dance floor, watching couples twirl beneath the crystal chandeliers. "Vincenzo is here," he replied quietly, "with companions who weren't invited." I followed his gaze and spotted Vince across the room, flanked by two men whose ill-fitting tuxedos couldn't disguise their true nature. Even in this refined setting, they radiated menace. Should we leave? I asked. Dante's hand tightened slightly at my waist. No. That would signal weakness, but stay close. The warning was unnecessary. I had no intention of straying from his side, not with the predatory way Vince was watching us. The confrontation, when it came, was almost anticlimactic in its brevity. Vince approached as Dante and I were speaking with the mayor, his movements loose in a way that suggested he'd had too much to drink. Dante, he interrupted, ignoring the mayor entirely. Quite the event. Almost makes people forget what you really are. A chill ran down my spine at the blatant challenge. The mayor excused himself hurriedly, sensing the undercurrents of danger. Vincenzo? Dante replied, his voice deceptively calm. You're drunk. Go home before you embarrass yourself further. Vince's gaze shifted to me, his eyes traveling over my body in a way that made me feel physically soiled. Always with the pretty new toys. Does this one know what happened to the last girl who warmed your bed? Dante's expression didn't change, but I felt him go absolutely still beside me, the stillness of a predator preparing to strike. You're making a mistake, he said softly. One final warning, Vincenzo. Leave, now. Something in his tone must have penetrated Vince's alcohol-fueled bravado, because the man's expression faltered briefly. But then his eyes hardened again. This isn't over, he muttered, before turning and stalking away, his companions following. Dante watched him go, his face impassive, but his eyes cold with a fury I'd never witnessed before. When he finally looked at me, his expression softened fractionally. We're leaving, he said, taking my elbow and guiding me toward the exit. The drive back to my apartment was silent, tension radiating from Dante in almost palpable waves. When the car pulled up to my building, I expected him to remain in the vehicle as he usually did, sending me up alone while he continued to his own residence. Instead, he exited the car with me. I'll see you upstairs, he told the driver, who nodded and pulled away. In the elevator, the silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken questions. Dante stood with his back straight, eyes fixed on the climbing floor numbers, controlled as always, yet vibrating with a barely contained energy that set my nerves on edge. When we entered the apartment, he moved immediately to the bar, pouring himself a generous measure of whiskey. He downed it in one swallow, then poured another. What did Vince mean? I finally asked, unable to contain the question any longer. About the last girl? Dante set the glass down carefully, his back to me. For a long moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Sophia, he said finally, his voice low. She was under my protection, like you. What happened to her? He turned then, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. She betrayed that protection, made an arrangement with a rival organization, used her position in my household to gather information. A cold knot formed in my stomach. And she disappeared. The official story is that she moved to Europe. Started a new life. The implication was clear in what he didn't say. Did you... I couldn't finish the question. No. His answer was immediate, definitive. I sent her away, gave her enough money to start over somewhere far from here, with the understanding that she never returned. Relief washed through me, followed immediately by confusion at my own reaction. Why should it matter to me whether Dante had killed a woman who betrayed him? Wasn't he still the same dangerous man either way? Vince doesn't know that, Dante continued. He believes I had her eliminated, as he would have done, as my father would have done. Why are you telling me this? He moved toward me, stopping close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Because I want you to understand the truth, not rumors, not assumptions. The truth about what? About who I am. His voice had dropped lower, something raw emerging beneath the controlled exterior, about what happens to those who betray me. About what happens to those who don't. My heart was racing now, responding to his proximity, to the intensity radiating from him. And which am I? One who betrays you, or one who doesn't? His eyes searched mine. That remains to be seen, but I think we both know you're not Sophia. Before I could process his meaning, his hand came up to cut my cheek, the touch surprisingly gentle for a man who commanded such violence. I've watched you these past weeks, Emma Sullivan. Watched you adapt to my world without losing yourself in it. Watched you see the darkness without becoming consumed by it. His thumb traced my lower lip, sending a shiver through me. Do you know how rare that is? I couldn't answer. Couldn't form coherent thoughts with him this close, with his touch scattering my reason like leaves in a storm. You should be afraid of me, he murmured. Of what I am. Of what I've done. I am, I whispered. And yet, here you stand. The faintest smile touched his lips. Courage. Another rare quality. When his lips met mine, it wasn't tentative or questioning. It was possession, claiming, the culmination of weeks of unacknowledged tension. My response was immediate, instinctive, my body arching toward his as if drawn by some primal force I couldn't resist. His kiss deepened, one hand tangling in my hair while the other pressed against the small of my back, eliminating any space between us. I could feel the heat of him through the thin fabric of my gown, the solid strength of his body against mine. When he finally pulled away, we were both breathing heavily. His eyes had darkened, the steel gray nearly black with desire. This isn't why I brought you into my life, he said, his voice rough. It wasn't planned. I know, I replied, my own voice barely recognizable. If this happens, Emma, there's no going back. No pretending we're just employer and employee. The lines blur, the risks increase. His expression grew serious. Vince already sees you as a weakness he could exploit against me. Is that what I am? A weakness? Something fierce and protective flashed in his eyes. No. But those who wish to harm me would see you that way. His hands framed my face, gentle despite the intensity of his gaze. I can protect you from many things, Emma. But once you truly enter my life this way, the danger increases tenfold. I should have been frightened, should have stepped away, maintained the professional boundary that had kept me safe these past weeks. Instead, I found myself reaching up to touch his face, tracing the scar along his jaw. I've been in danger since the moment I texted you by mistake, I said softly. At least this way, the risk serves a purpose beyond survival. His expression changed then, something almost like tenderness softening his features. You continue to surprise me, Emma Sullivan. That night marked a transformation, not just in our relationship, but in my understanding of Dante Castellano. As barriers fell away, physical, emotional, psychological, I glimpsed the man beneath the carefully constructed facade of the Mafia boss, the boy who'd lost his father too young and shouldered the weight of an empire, the man who'd chosen a different path than his predecessors, preferring strategy to brutality, yet willing to employ violence when necessary. He was no hero from a romance novel, no misunderstood bad boy waiting for redemption. He was a man who lived by his own code in a world of shadows, who commanded loyalty through respect rather than fear, who protected what was his with unwavering determination, and somehow, against all reason, I had become his. The confrontation with Vince came 3 days later, in the form of an attempted ambush as we left a restaurant. 2 men approached our car, hands reaching inside their jackets, in a movement that could only mean one thing. But Dante's security team was faster, more efficient. The threat was neutralized before it fully materialized, the would-be attackers subdued and taken away for questioning. That night, as we lay tangled in the sheets of what had become our shared bed, Dante traced patterns on my bare skin and spoke of things he rarely acknowledged. Vincenzo has forced my hand, he said quietly. I've been patient, tried to guide him toward a more strategic approach. But he's chosen his path. I knew what he meant, knew that Vince would not survive his betrayal. Weeks ago, this knowledge would have horrified me. Now, I felt only a cold acceptance. This was Dante's world. These were its rules. Will it ever end? I asked, resting my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. The challenges, the threats, the constant vigilance, his fingers stilled on my skin. No, but it can be managed, contained. He tilted my face up to his. Does that change things for you? I considered the question seriously. Did it change my feelings? knowing that Dante's world would always include violence and danger, that our life together would never be completely normal. I gave up normal the moment I texted you by mistake, I said finally, and I don't regret it. It was true. The woman I'd been, broken, desperate, drowning in grief and debt, seemed like a stranger now. In her place stood someone stronger, more resilient, who had found a kind of belonging in the most unexpected place. Dante's arms tightened around me. I'll always protect you, Emma. Whatever comes. Whatever it takes. I know, I whispered. And for the first time in my life, I truly believed someone when they said those words. The next morning, news of Vincenzo Caruso's tragic accident dominated the local headlines. The official story: a brake failure, a car plunging into the harbor. No body recovered. Dante didn't mention it, and I didn't ask. Some lines, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed. I had made my choice, embraced this complicated, dangerous man with all his shadows and sharp edges, accepted the protection he offered, and the price it carried. 6 months after my accidental text, as we stood on the balcony of what was now our shared penthouse, watching the city lights below, Dante placed a small velvet box in my hand. I don't offer traditional relationships, he said, his eyes serious on mine. My world doesn't allow for that, but I can offer you this: my protection, my loyalty, my commitment, for as long as we both live. Inside the box was a ring, a deep blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds. Not a traditional engagement ring, but something uniquely ours. Is this a proposal? I asked, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. It's a promise, he replied, that whatever happens, whatever storms come, you will never face them alone again. As he slid the ring onto my finger, I thought of that desperate night months ago, when I'd sat surrounded by bills I couldn't pay, texting a number I thought belonged to a man who had abandoned me. How that simple mistake had changed everything, had led me here, to this moment, to this man. Yes, I said simply, and sealed the promise with a kiss. In Dante's world, happy endings weren't guaranteed. But second chances were possible, and sometimes the darkest mistakes led to the brightest beginnings.